Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cirrus Identity's third webinar. Today's topic is our new attribute authority, and Karen's going to be driving the slides. I'm just kicking things off. My name is Deidre. I'm the CEO of Cirrus Identity. For those of you who don't know us, we've been around for 10 years now. We're a cloud-hosted identity management company that was born out of the higher education community, and our products really target the higher education market. We have a growing suite of products. We keep adding things and enhancing things that we already have available. Our Bridge product is one of our more popular products, and we heard from a lot of customers who were interested in the Bridge, but they couldn't migrate all of their attributes to Azure AD or Okta for a variety of reasons. And we're looking for a way that they could host those attributes in a third-party attribute authority, but still have them asserted when the user authenticated. So we implemented an attribute authority, which works with both our Bridge and our proxy products, but we're going to be focusing today on the Bridge implementation. And we're excited to have Mark Rank, our Director of Product, sharing some information about the Bridge, as well as Patrick Radke, our CTO. And we're especially happy to welcome two of our customers from Angelo State University and SUNY Geneseo, both of whom will talk about implementing the Cirrus Bridge at their campuses. And then at the end, we'll have time for questions and answers. There's the chat that's available if you would like to ask questions, but we'll open up the mic and have people to come off mute for Q&A at the end of both the presentations. So I think that's it for my introduction. And with that, I'll pass it over to Mark.
Thank you, Deidre. So good morning, afternoon, folks, depending on what time zone you're in. I'm Mark Rank. I'm Director of Product here at Cirrus Identity, and I'm going to present a few slides about what is the Cirrus Attribute Authority, how it's used, what is the integration pattern, and talk a little bit about the behind-the-scenes flow. And as Deidre said, Patrick Radke, our CTO, is also available. So if there are questions that stump me, I'm going to throw to him. We're going to start out though with what is it? As Deidre said in the intro, we have a lot of customers that are using both our Bridge product and our proxy product, but they want to integrate some additional attributes from another source, whether that be an LDAP enabled directory, some other kind of database, or other system of record. This attribute authority, like all of Cirrus's solutions, is hosted, and it enables real-time integration of these additional attributes. It can, as I said, can be either an LDAP-enabled directory, so on-prem Azure Active Directory, another LDAP directory, or other kinds of data sources if necessary. It does integrate with both our Bridge and our proxy. And for the LDAP attribute provider we have developed, that also is a direct plugin for Entra ID, formerly known as Azure Active Directory, custom claim provider functionality as well. So it is compatible with that for direct plugging into your Azure environment. So here, Karen, if you want to move on, it enables. As Deidre outlined, there are several use cases. One of them that's very common is there are sensitive attributes that you may want to assert to only specific service providers. And more importantly, you don't necessarily want them available in Entra ID or Okta or the other directories for general consumption. There are also organizations that have highly customized their directories, and they find when they're moving to Entra ID, Okta, or some of the other options, they can't get all their custom attributes presented there. It allows some customers to accelerate the migration to Web SSO because they can defer or take longer time to migrate those attributes or remediate specific service providers and still move forward with SSO implementations. And certainly for the Cirrus proxy, there's a emerging implementation pattern where organizations that are operating as a virtual organization want to decorate the incoming assertion from other parties with attributes that they control for the service providers that are behind the Cirrus proxy. So that is also another use case. Karen, if you want to move on to the next slide. How it is implemented. So there are multiple ways it can be integrated. It can be directly integrated with the Cirrus bridge for Entra ID, Okta, or the other commercial web SSO solutions. As I said, the LDAP attribute provider is compatible with Microsoft's API and specification for Entra ID custom claims, so it can be plugged directly there, which you'll hear about from our customers. It can also be directly integrated with the LDAP proxy. And the one thing to be aware of with the LDAP provider is we do require a service account, we require query parameters, and because it is a hosted solution, the attribute authority does need to access the LDAP directory from some public internet. So there are often firewall rules that need to be adjusted. We'll explore more number 1 and 2 as we go forward. Karen, if you want to move on. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the technology, and here is especially where Patrick is going to keep me honest and or throw tomatoes at me with things that I may misstate. So the overall flow is as presented there by the confusogram. No webinar should not have a diagram that doesn't have clouds in it. On the left, you see the directory server that would be LDAP enabled. There is a firewall connection. What we really want to do is start the diagram in the lower right, where the identity provider is making some kind of assertion that is being presented to the bridge. The bridge is looking at the assertion and then moving identities onto the attribute authority to look up the additional attributes. That lookup is done by the directory server. The directory server returns the attributes. Those additional attributes are then added by the Cirrus bridge in this case. Same pattern would happen with Entra ID's custom claim provider. Those additional attributes are added, and then the completed outgoing assertion with those attributes is passed on to the downstream service providers. Depending on the implementation pattern, there are options to transform, edit, modify those attributes before passing them on. Next slide, please. The other thing I want to stress about the Cirrus attribute authority is this is not a data syncing tool. We are not taking data from one place and putting it into Entra ID, Okta, those kinds of things. This is happening in real time. And the asserted attributes coming through the attribute authority are as up to date as the source system. So if you have a directory server in the background that is being updated on an hourly or real-time basis, those attributes will be reflected each time an authentication happens. And really the only constraint on data timeliness is what is the authentication session that is being established, either with the Cirrus bridge, the Cirrus proxy, or Entra ID itself, or Okta for that matter. And with that, I think that concludes, the intro material. I'm now going to pass it on to 2 of our customers. The first is Angelo State University. So both Jason and Riley will talk about their implementation. And then after that, SUNY Geneseo and Jack and David will present their implementations. Both of the implementations have generally the same pattern with slight differences, and we'll call those out as we go.
Hello. Hi, my name is Jason Brake. I'm the Information Security Officer at Angelo State University. And Riley, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything on yours.
Sure. I'm a system analyst developer at ASU, and I do a good portion of our identity management stuff and single sign-on magic. So yeah.
So, and Thank you, Karen. So for us, we're currently using the WSO2 product for CAS and SAML. And so the identity server product, it's actually the rebranded Ethos Identity product is what we've been using. CAS, of course, just something we want to eventually get rid of, but we know at least for now, we still have some applications that we do have to use those for. So we've been looking for a place to go. It's just one of those things that we had been talking about it for a while. We know we wanted to move off this product, and Azure had to come up kind of as a possible option. To be honest, it was one of those where we kind of stumbled into that because we had actually reached out to Cirrus Identity a while back about trying to help us with our shibboleth implementation, going, hey, we need a little bit of help supporting it. We don't have many things in our shibboleth implementation, so we don't have a whole lot of experience with it. But at the time, money kind of fell apart and priorities changed and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of had to back burner that. But we got an announcement from Elution that they said, hey, we're no longer going to be supporting the Ethos Identity product. And we went, oh no. Okay, well, we were planning to move. Now we're being forced to move. So we kind of reached back out and said, hey, we need some help. We know y'all have these things y'all can help us do with some CAS bridges and stuff like that. And so we kind of reached back out and got interested in both the CAS and the SAML bridges while we were there. One of the things we didn't actually realize while we were talking was how to deal with sensitive data that we had in our directory. So we've actually extended our schema, put protection on those attributes to ensure that only certain accounts could get to those. But we had found that we needed to do that because the data sources where we could get that from weren't always available for all the systems we were working with. And so we needed a way to be able to pull that information into particular places where we were providing identity. So during our discussions, it came up that this was a new thing, a new feature that we were going to be able to look at. And we said, ooh, very interesting, and kind of jumped on it. I think we ended up being the second one, I think, to do it, but we're very interested in it. And was like, okay, hey, this actually helps us solve a problem that we weren't exactly sure how we were going to solve. We just knew, well, we got to get off CAS and SAML, or get our CAS and SAML stuff moved off of the WSO2 platform, and didn't know where we were going to go. So that turned out to be a very good thing. In addition to our campus ID, we actually have a couple other attributes that are sensitive as well. And we were kind of, before we knew about the attribute authority, we weren't sure what we were going to do, and we were kind of going, well, we think we can get away with making these available. There was a lot of head scratching, and being the security guy, I was the one having to help make some of these decisions. So there was a lot of sleepless nights, me trying to go, okay, am I going to be okay with that, and that kind of stuff. And then the last part, just as the kind of pre-planning before we were getting into this, was we'd been a member of InCommon for years, and much like I had said, we didn't have a whole lot of experience with shibboleth, and so never could figure out how we were going to get into the Federation. We've been using it for certificate services and other things, and so this opportunity to be able to work with Cirrus Identity actually came up, and to be honest, it was really easy. So it was one of those where it was great to be able to kind of check that off as a box that we didn't realize going into this we were going to be able to do. So very happy with that. So Raleigh, I'm going to hand this back off to you and let you take care of the rest of this.
Alrighty. So this is kind of our before picture. Lots of horizontal down there where you can see Active Directory kind of, that's where we all started before Azure came into the picture. So we had all of those kind of connected to Active Directory doing different things. Azure was using its own login screen. Everything else on the left was a WSO2 login screen. So we did not have single sign-on between those two systems prior to this venture. That's since been resolved and is a wonderful improvement of quality of life. So generally, yeah, it was kind of a mess, but it was what we had to work with. Clean, just not optimal use case. So I don't know if I have anything else for this one.
Okay.
But yeah, I didn't know if we wanted to offer questions or save that for the end. So
I think we're going to save that for the end, Riley.
alrighty. So the bridge came in and we got it hooked into Azure since we're going to start using Azure as our primary identity provider. And we're using it for CAS items and some SAML items. The SAML bridge is really geared towards the Incommon and other kind of federations where they're base. I guess they're all really similar. There's options to make them not similar. There's ways to do that too if you need a Incommon app to be special. So that's really met all of our needs on the SAML bridge side. The CAS bridge works great. It's we still got a lot of work to do, but it's coming along. There's items in our lessons learned that I can expand on that more. So um, I think I'm ready for the next one. And so here's kind of where we're going and what we have functioning. We have our centralized LDAP store that we're doing pass-through authentication with Azure AD Connect, and so everything's really all talking to Active Directory still on premise, but we're using Azure for the primary identity provider. The interesting part here that wasn't super illustrated in the earlier slide from the Cirrus diagram is the attribute authority piece. You'll see the line in the middle going up to SAML applications. Those don't necessarily have to go across the bridge to use that attribute authority from Azure with the custom claim provider. And we didn't know that going in early on, but it turned out to be a really great benefit because we have complete control over all of it. So if we want to send those claims through something other than SAML, as far as I know, nothing would stop us. If we were to leverage OpenID, it's just another custom claims provider. And on the right, we have the bridge that is involved, or the two bridges that are involved in CAS all the time, and the SAML apps that are need a middleman beyond Azure where they're doing either Ncommon or some other shibboleth scenario that Azure may not necessarily support 100%. So it's a good place to be. I'm really liking how it turned out. And I think we can go to the next one. We were I'm going to make a quick note on that prior screen
Okay.
for if we can go back one. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Nope, we're good.
For a long time, there were very minimal customizations available on this part of Azure. We were able to re-review those and lots of new things got added. So since we're using pass-through auth, we couldn't change passwords here and whatnot. So that password help actually links to our password changing solution, management solution. And then our account issuance process is linked on the bottom as well. So that was really nice, a big save for us because when we first started looking at this, we were just like, well, we'll just live with it not being what we need. And then it turned out we were able to make it what we need. So that was a big win, but not related to Cirrus, just maybe important to somebody. Microsoft's always changing things. So if it wasn't there now, might want to re-review that. And then I think we can go to the next one. So as far as what we, before we pursued the bridge and the custom attribute authority with Cirrus, we investigated a handful of things, many Microsoft calls, a handful of support tickets. One of them was, hey, these custom security attributes they had in preview looked promising, but today they're not. They're nowhere near what we needed. They're definitely secure, but you can't really use them for anything in the realm of what we needed, which was single sign-on and custom claims. They're also not easy to populate. I didn't see any way to populate them other than manually clicking on the screen. So to save anybody a rabbit hole, I wouldn't bother going down that one until they get it out of preview, and it's probably still not going to do what you want. Their idea for that isn't aligned with our interpretation of what that might mean. So They also mentioned the schema extension stuff, which we are utilizing. It works great, but it is not secure. It doesn't meet our security requirements. If anybody's familiar with Microsoft Graph and all the, I guess the enterprise apps that people may or may not be able to use kind of single sign-on to an unaffiliated party through their Microsoft account. Graph user profile is kind of the base case. It's almost always what everybody's using. It's step one. In V2 of the Graph API, all of those schema extensions are exposed in the user profile. So you could potentially be exposing those attributes from the schema extensions to apps that you didn't really want to have that information. So that was another avenue we had investigated before we pursued the Cirrus bridge, or the Cirrus Attribute Authority. Sorry. I guess one of the bigger challenges we had early on was our service provider inventory. We had 2 instances of our the WSO2 solution from Illusion, one for test, one for prod. We had done a lot of things to make 2-factor work in there, so it was a huge mess. Everything was very tailored to itself, and we're able to kind of cut some of that back now that multi-factor is being handled at the 0 layer. And it was a challenge to inventory it between the 2 systems, so we used an approach of dumping it to a spreadsheet and kind of going through it by hand. So we exported them all. We luckily had ways to calculate usage that we had built previously that tracked it over a long period of time. We had a year's worth of utilization data. And then we cleaned that up, corrected a lot of it because some of it you couldn't even tell if the app was SAML or CAS from the dump we made. So we had to do a few iterations of that. After that, we were able to start documenting claims and kind of making roadmaps and plans for each of them. Around 30% of our apps in for production were SAML. The other 70 were CAS. We had 1 or 2 shibboleths, but not really part of this conversation. And they were hosted under the same host name because that WSO2 product from Illusion did CAS and SAML, among other things. Those were the only 2 we used in it, though. That being said, it was too, it wasn't homogeneous, or I shouldn't use words I can't say. We really wanted the host name cutover option where we would just move that host name to the Cirrus identity provider, but we were unable to because 1, we had 2 host names. Y'all probably could have facilitated that, but either way, we needed a little bit slower roll to testing some of these. So we didn't utilize that, but it would have been really nice if we didn't have any SAML at all. So that part's a challenge. It was hard to make a decision for sure. We slept on that one for a while, trying to figure out which way to go. But otherwise, I would definitely say the most challenging part is the inventory. And then there was a lot of time spent on how do we secure these attributes, and Cirrus was able to just solve that for us. So it was a good experience. Worked really well.
Sure, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Jason and Riley. It's very heartwarming to hear people sort of in the same boat as us. We are very similar to what you just heard. Actually, maybe we should introduce Jack and I first. My name's David Warden. I've been with Geneseo for over 15 years now, and one of the first major responsibilities I picked up was our federation and single sign-on system, which has been CAS and simple SAML going back very, very many years. Jack, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Jack Truckenmiller. I'm a systems analyst here at Geneseo. I'm in my first year here at CIT, but I'm also Geneseo alum, so I've been here a couple of years before this. And I'm sort of inheriting now that we've moved to Cirrus, the CAS, Simple SAML, Federation stuff from Dave. So that's sort of the story here.
So to kind of get into our challenge, I'd say we were very similar to what Jason and Riley sort of laid out, with the exception that we were a little bit further along our transition of SAML services to Azure AD or Entra ID. We had we wanted to get as many things out of Simple SAML as we could, sort of in preparation for Cirrus or some other solution to sort of the same issue that you heard, Ellucian software. We had a campus identifier that we didn't really feel comfortable syncing in a custom attribute to Azure AD. So Cirrus was sort of identified as a potential solution for that. Other things, which you kind of already heard, we had CAS. It was hard to upgrade. It was hard to stay current. Simple SAML was a little bit easier, but, that was hard to keep up with. And yeah, this campus identifier was stored in LDAP, and we, for those, Graph API reasons, we didn't feel comfortable putting that up into the Microsoft ecosystem. And I guess the only other thing, one slight difference, we were federating with In Common with our Simple SAML PHP on-prem, but we did have to, I did not set it up correctly, so I needed to onboard every single federated app in Common that people asked for, which I eventually learned is not the way it's supposed to work. So that was a little embarrassing, but it's better now. And I think Jack is going to take us through some diagrams next.
Yes. So this is sort of our before diagram here. This was what we were running before we made the switch to Cirrus. So you'll see down on the bottom, we had Simple SAML PHP, which was delegated to CAS, which was delegated to Azure AD, which then synced to Active Directory through AD Connect. And so Simple SAML PHP was mostly for our in-common federated SAML apps and any ones that needed our secret ID number we didn't want to put in Azure. Then there are still those stubborn CAS apps out there that those had to be done through CAS. And then Dave did a lot of work moving many of the Simple SAML PHP apps that did not need special things to Azure. So we were in a pretty good space in that regard. And so after we made the move, now Azure AD is where we set up all the apps. And then if it's a CAS app, it uses the Cirrus CAS bridge to get there. If it's an in-common SAML app, it goes through the Cirrus SAML bridge to get there. We hadn't done the thing that Angelo State discovered where you can have straight, if it just needs the custom claims provider, we haven't implemented that yet, but that's definitely a good note where you don't have to necessarily go through the bridge. And we also did, you'll see the DNS add-on. So we had load balanced bunch of auth servers. And so we gave that load balanced name to Cirrus. And so that made the cutover pretty simple switching over. So that's sort of our new environment now. It's a lot cleaner, just setting up everything pretty much in Azure. And a note on that with In Common is now that we're with Cirrus, it works the way it's supposed to, where if it doesn't need any special attributes, you can just sign in to an in-common app. And there was an in-common app I think we actually missed initially that needed a little special customization, but I just had to set that up in Azure and it just worked. There was no like, oh, I need to put in a support request to Cirrus now to make this work and give them the metadata. No, I just had to set it up correctly and off it went. So it's pretty great. And then expanding on that a little bit, so we have for the special attributes, we can't put in Azure or Entra ID for security reasons. They exist as protected attributes in Active Directory, which that's load balanced by an F5, and there's a firewall in front of it. So we have the service account that talks to the load balancer and gets those attributes out of AD, and then it sends it to the bridge, and it can also just send it to the custom claims provider, which is very handy. And then there is at least one app that needed member of that Azure AD really does not like member of, but Cirrus was able to implement it in such a way that we could actually pass member of as needed. And then the CAS apps and SAML apps that need these special attributes get those from the attribute authority. They get passed. Everything looks peachy and works wonderfully. And then this is our Geneseo login screen. So even before we made the move, because we had everything delegated the way we did, everyone saw this login screen. And then you could tell if you were going through either SAML or CAS because it would have like one Geneseo central auth app, I think was what it was called. But now you can actually see like which specific app you're trying to access because we were able to split them up with Cirrus, which is nice because then not every app has to get passed attributes they don't need. So that was kind of good from a security win as well.
Cool. Thank you, Jack. Some of these, might sound like a kind of a repeat, but if we had to give any advice or talk about what we learned, I really think that the effort we spent before our Cirrus implementation, moving as many services as we could to straight vanilla Azure AD SAML, really helped a lot for these reasons listed. It forced us to do that inventory work, and it reduced the amount of, Cirrus testing that we needed to do. I think Jack and I are both, very pleased with the documentation and the process for implementing this. We both are pretty comfortable in the Azure AD sort of management interface. And so the work that we had to do there was very familiar and straightforward to get this set up. We do kind of want to call out, so Jack mentioned that our LDAP service that we had Cirrus connect to is load balanced by an F5 big IP hardware device. I don't think it was absolutely necessary, but we feel like it was a good idea for us to share our sort of TCP parameters for that service, just so that they had a clear view of what they were working with and what timeouts were and stuff like that. They handled everything. It's not like we had to change anything on there, but just a reminder, it's a good thing to share if you have that kind of service. As Jack mentioned, we did use the DNS takeover feature, and we were lucky that we only had one name. Both CAS and Simple SAML were under the same host name. And I like that feature a lot. The only thing that we would want to call out is we had one misbehaving app that we needed to flush the operating system DNS cache to get it to see that Cirrus had taken over that name. So if you use that feature, just be on the lookout. And then lastly, one thing that really helped us in troubleshooting that issue was the Cirrus console, where you can sort of get a report of the last, minute, hour, certain period of time, what HTTP requests have been made to which CAS endpoints. And so we use that to look at the service validate endpoint to see, like, why is this, broken service not, is this hitting the validation endpoint and getting an error or failing, or is it just not hitting the endpoint at all? So shout out to the Cirrus console for helping us troubleshoot that.
Yeah,
Jack,
and
did
I'll
you have
add,
anything else you wanted to add to this?
I was going to add on to that last point about the Cirrus console, because there was one vendor who was using CAS who decided to change things like conveniently right around when we were doing this implementation. And so their service broke, but we could tell it wasn't like Cirrus that had broken it. It was them who broke it, because we could see, like, in our Cirrus logs, yes, people were successfully trying to get to this service, but it was never service validating. And so we could send that on to said vendor and be like, look, we're pretty sure our auth system's working. Something on your end broke when you tried to make this change. And so it was definitely an interesting time having them do that right at the same time. But the Cirrus console is very handy because you can see all sorts of information. And one other thing about the attribute authority / Azure AD fun stuff, we have another vendor who wants our special ID, but they want it like transformed, because this is something our dining services use, which I used to work for them before I came and worked for the main IT department. So I know that their like card system sort of uses our ID as a unique identifier, but it doesn't want the letter in the front. So we had to strip that off. But Cirrus was able to accommodate that by giving us the like proper Azure AD transform to the custom claim, and that worked. I did that testing. It's a mobile app, but I was able to test it because I have an M2 Mac, so I did some testing on my end, and it just worked out of the box. Like, there was no yelling or anything, so that was pretty nice.